Chapter 1: The Ask That Revealed Everything. They thought I would stay quiet forever. But the night I found my CEO breaking into my data logs at 2 in the morning using my credentials to fake numbers I never touched, something inside me shifted. I was Asha Verma, the senior data engineer they thought they could frame, fire, and bury behind a fabricated scandal. But when I discovered the exported user metadata they secretly sold and the ghost logs they forged with timestamps 19 minutes off, I realized their entire empire was balancing on lies so fragile they would collapse the moment the truth surfaced. And all I did was refuse to change a single number. That tiny moment started everything that happened next. I was 33 the year everything unraveled at Helix Lab, the year I learned that the truth has its own way of rising no matter how hard people try to bury it. I had been a senior data engineer there for 4 years, tucked inside a converted warehouse in the Soma district of San Francisco, where glass walls and neon signage tried to disguise the fact that most of us were held together by caffeine, fear of missing funding, and the hope that maybe this time the numbers would look good enough. My mornings usually started before the sun rose. I liked arriving early when the floor was still quiet and the office lights had not fully warmed up. There was something healing in that gray halfway darkness. I would sit at my desk with a paper cup of the bitter coffee from the downstairs bakery and scroll through our user metrics. Most days, I told myself I still loved my job. I loved the logic of data and the way numbers quietly told stories about human behavior long before anyone said anything out loud. But lately, the stories the numbers told were getting darker. Retention slipping again, daily usage down, churn creeping upward like a slow leak under a floorboard. My mother used to say that numbers are like people. If you silence them long enough, they stop trusting you. And whenever the figures dipped, I could hear her voice from the little apartment I rented near Mission Bay. She had moved in with me temporarily that winter while recovering from a minor surgery. She was stronger now and often said she wanted to go back home soon, but I knew she stayed because I barely slept and she worried about how much weight I carried on my shoulders. That morning started like any other, until I saw an email from the chief technology officer asking me to join an urgent meeting. No subject line, no context, just a polite request to come upstairs. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, the air smelled different. Too still, too staged. I walked into the small glass conference room and found the chief executive officer already there, leaning back in his chair with a smile that had no warmth in it. The chief technology officer stood beside him with a tablet in hand, eyes darting toward me, then away again. The chief executive officer made small talk, the kind that floats above your head and means nothing. Then he clicked the remote and a screen lit up with the week's metrics. The red lines glowed like open wounds. Daily active usage down 27%. Retention down 40. Churned up 33. He spoke gently at first. He said the figures were alarming, but not hopeless. He said investors expected dips from time to time, and that it was our job to show a convincing narrative. He said I could help by polishing the data streams so that the charts presented a more optimistic outlook. He said everyone in the industry did it, and that this was simply how early-stage companies survived. I felt the room shrink around me. The chief technology officer tried to give me an encouraging nod, but he looked more frightened than supportive. I kept my voice steady and told them I could not modify the results. The product had problems, and we needed to fix those problems, not pretend they did not exist. If we did not respect the truth in the data, then nothing else we built would stand. The chief executive officer's smile faded so slowly, it was almost graceful. He asked me again to reconsider. Not directly, not aggressively, just with a cold tilt of the head that suggested life could become very uncomfortable if I stayed firm. I kept refusing. My hands were steady, but something in my chest began to tense the way it always did when I sensed the line being crossed. He shifted to irritation, then to thinly veiled threats. He said growth stage investors were not patient. He said the board needed results, not excuses. He said I had always been a loyal employee and he expected loyalty again. I felt oddly calm, almost detached. I explained once more that I would not falsify the numbers. The chief technology officer looked down at the table, as if studying the wood grain could somehow protect him from being asked to take a side. The meeting ended without resolution. The chief executive officer dismissed me with a polite nod that sounded like a warning. As I walked out, I noticed a printed spreadsheet lying slightly under his laptop. Large marketing partnership fees. Amounts too high and too frequent to be legitimate for a company our size. It was there only a second before he slid a notebook over it, but the numbers were burned into my memory. I returned to my desk and tried to work, but my mind stayed stuck in that small room. By late afternoon, my head hurt, and the office felt too loud. When I finally drove home, the sky was heavy with fog, and the streetlights reflected in the wet pavement like shards of glass. My mother was reading on the couch when I walked in. She set her book down and studied my face the way only a mother can. She asked if I was all right. I said I was tired. She asked if something had happened. I said not really, but she knew that was a lie, and she let it go only because she trusted I would come to her when I was ready. When she went to bed, I sat at the dining table with my laptop. I logged into the internal servers and began examining the raw logs. I wanted to see if anything had been changed since the previous week. It took only minutes to find the first irregularity. An access attempt made late at night from a device registered under the chief executive officer's name. Then another. And another, each one pointing toward my data folders. I sat back, feeling a cold rush through my spine. I dug deeper. Several files I created earlier that week had different timestamps than the ones I saved. One was marked as updated at an hour I knew I had been asleep. Another appeared newer than the file that held the correct version. Someone had overwritten my reports. I felt anger rise slowly. Not hot, but controlled, like a locked door being pushed open. This was not negligence. This was intent. And if someone was already changing my work, there was no telling how far they would go. I opened a secure backup system I had set up a year earlier during an unrelated audit. It was a habit of mine to store shadow copies of critical data streams in case a bug or system error destroyed something important. I never imagined I would need those backups to protect myself. For the next 2 hours, I quietly saved everything. 6 months of raw data, All analytic models, every untouched log I could retrieve. I moved methodically, careful not to trigger alerts. Outside my window, the city lights dimmed under the fog. I heard distant traffic and the hum of the refrigerator, and nothing else. My mother's words echoed back to me from years ago when she taught ethics to her high school students. She used to say that truth is like gravity. You can fight it, deny it, or ignore it, but it will pull everything back to where it belongs in the end. When the final file finished copying, I closed my laptop. I felt exhausted, but clearer than I had in days. I pushed my chair back, stretched my arms, and let my breath settle. I did not know then that the folder I had just created would one day be shown in boardrooms, in courtrooms, and in the news. I only knew that something inside me had shifted. A line had been crossed, and there was no way to step back over it. I turned off the kitchen light, walked to my room, and lay awake for a long time listening to the rain against the window. At that moment, I was not thinking about revenge or justice or even survival. I was thinking about my mother sleeping in the next room, breathing softly, believing I would always choose the right thing. And I realized that the files I saved might someday decide the fate of an entire company, even if I did not intend it. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 2: The Push, the Sabotage, and the Silence. I went back to the office the next morning carrying the weight of a secret I had not asked for. Something in the air felt changed the moment I stepped out of the elevator. People looked up when I passed, but looked away almost immediately. The kind of silence that spreads in workplaces where everyone knows trouble is coming, but no one wants to be caught standing too close to it. Conversations ended when I approached. A few coworkers gave half smiles that never reached their eyes. Even the fluorescent lights felt harsher, like they were exposing something no one wanted to acknowledge. I sat down at my desk and opened my inbox. Several messages I had sent the night before still had no replies. These were people who usually responded within minutes. One email from the infrastructure team had been marked unread and then flagged without comment. Another message I sent about a broken integration had been completely ignored. It felt like people were quietly stepping back from me, as if my presence had become radioactive. I tried to log into one of our internal tools and hit an access denied message. I frowned and refreshed the page, but the same message appeared. I tried another internal API portal and got the same result. I took a slow breath and walked to the Chief Technology Officer's office. His door was half open. He looked up from his tablet, startled. "Ken, my API access is restricted. Did something break?" He forced a smile that did not look like it belonged on his face. "Ken, probably a system hiccup. We are rolling out some permission updates." I waited for more explanation, but he avoided my eyes, tapping anxiously on the edge of his tablet. I thanked him and left, knowing he had just lied to me and knowing he hated that he had done it. That was the worst part. I had always respected him, but respect was becoming a luxury at Helix Lab. Back at my desk, I opened the analytics dashboard. At first glance, the numbers looked too perfect. Growth in segments that had been declining for months, high retention in cohorts that had always struggled, predictions that contradicted every data pattern I had studied for the past year. I scrolled further and felt a chill run up my spine. These charts were not mine. Someone had replaced entire sections of the dashboard with fabricated metrics. Clean curves, no noise, too smooth to be real. I whispered under my breath, "This isn't possible." I clicked into the documentation and saw recent edits by accounts I did not recognize. My chest tightened. It was one thing to pressure me to manipulate the data. It was another to simply take control of my tools and do it without me. The message was clear. They no longer needed my cooperation. They needed my disappearance. Around noon, as I tried to troubleshoot a corrupted data pipeline, I felt someone stop behind my chair. I turned and saw Eli Fander shifting nervously, glancing down the hallway before speaking. "Eli, can we talk somewhere else?" His voice trembled slightly. We walked to a small break area by the emergency exit, far from the main office floor. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking everywhere but at me. "Eli, Kane came to me this morning. He asked me to validate the numbers on those new dashboards. He said you were too overwhelmed and that he needed confirmation from someone more flexible." I stared at him. He still refused to meet my eyes. "Eli, he told me the revisions were part of a reforecasting model and that I only needed to approve them for alignment. But those numbers were not even close to the original data. They were completely made up." My voice came out quiet. "Asha, and you signed off?" He swallowed hard. "Eli, I did. But only because he hinted my position might be reviewed next quarter if I didn't. I know that sounds cowardly, but he made it sound like the whole company depended on us presenting consistent metrics. I hated myself while I was doing it." I placed a hand on his arm. "Asha, thank you for telling me. I know that took courage." He let out a shaky exhale. "Eli, be careful. They are targeting you. I can feel it." He walked away quickly as if afraid someone might see us together. I watched him go, feeling a strange mix of empathy and heartbreak. Eli was not a bad person. He was a scared one, and fear in this company was becoming contagious. In the afternoon, I received a meeting request from Rachel Torres in Human Resources. The subject was performance review discussion. Rachel was young but sharp, someone who always tried to stay friendly without breaking HR formality. When I entered her office, she gestured toward a chair. "Rachel, thanks for coming by. I wanted to touch base about some concerns regarding recent delays and discrepancies in your work." My jaw tightened. "Asha, what discrepancies?" She glanced at a printed sheet and cleared her throat, keeping her tone neutral. "Rachel, there have been questions raised about accuracy and timeliness in your latest reports. Leadership is wondering if you might need some time to recite, maybe even take a brief step back from core responsibilities." I realized then what was happening. They were building a paper trail, a future justification, a file that would eventually describe me as unstable or incompetent. "Asha, Rachel, my reports were changed without my knowledge. The inaccuracies didn't come from me." She gave a sympathetic smile that did not reach her eyes. "Rachel, I hear you, but this is just a preliminary conversation. No decisions have been made." She closed the folder and I understood the real message. The decision had been made. They were simply aligning the documentation to match it. As I left the HR office, I walked past the main conference room. The door was slightly ajar. I heard voices inside, low and strained. "Blake, get rid of the logs before Friday. I don't want investors to see any of this." "Ken, we should be careful. If she still has access to anything stored locally." "Blake, then cut every access point she has. I don't care how. Just do it." My heart hammered so loudly I thought they might hear it. I backed away, careful not to make a sound. Later that week, the entire company gathered for a mandatory floor meeting. People stood in uneasy clusters near their departments, Some whispered, some pretended to check their phones. The chief executive officer stepped onto a small platform at the front. He thanked everyone for their dedication, then turned his gaze toward me. Blake, we have identified inconsistencies in several key metrics produced recently. Until we can complete an internal review, Asha will be taking a temporary leave to evaluate her workflows and ensure alignment with our standards. A hush fell across the room. I could feel dozens of eyes on me. Not one voice spoke up. Not one person asked a question. I felt something inside me harden. Not out of bitterness, out of clarity. These were people I had trained, supported, stayed late for. People whose workloads I had helped balance. People who had trusted me with their mistakes. Now they avoided my gaze as if acknowledging me might make them vulnerable. When the meeting ended, I walked slowly back to my desk. My inbox was quiet. My access to nearly every internal tool had been revoked. A few coworkers passed me, but did not stop. I gathered a few personal items and left the office quietly. The air outside smelled faintly of the bay. A bus rumbled in the distance. The sky had that pale, washed-out color that comes just before dusk. I tried to steady my breathing. That night, at home, I sat at the dining room table with the lamp casting a small pool of light on my laptop. My hands were cold even though the apartment was warm. I refreshed my email and saw a new message marked urgent. It was an automated HR notification informing me that my position had been terminated effective immediately. No explanation beyond an attached document referencing performance concerns. My stomach dropped, but before I could fully react, another email appeared from an anonymous address. No subject line. Inside was a single sentence and a hyperlink. They are deleting this right now. You should look. My pulse quickened. I clicked the link and a hidden directory opened in a secure cloud environment I had never seen before. It contained folders mirroring some of our oldest data pipelines. Someone had sent me access to a secondary server I had not known existed. Someone inside was trying to help me. I stared at the directories, the file sizes, the timestamp. Whatever was here, they had tried to erase it. The question was why, and what exactly they did not want anyone to see. I pulled my laptop closer and began scrolling through the first set of files, feeling the hum of danger rising as the truth in front of me expanded far beyond anything I had imagined. I did not know that opening those folders would change everything that came after. Chapter 3. What They Buried and What I Found. I leaned closer to the screen, scrolling slowly as the directory expanded into dozens of subfolders I had never seen during my 4 years at Helix Lab. Rows of files stared back at me like unopened letters, each carrying the weight of something I was not sure I wanted to know. Still, I clicked the first one. An email thread opened. Blake and Ken. Short messages at first, then more detailed. The earliest ones looked like casual discussions about forecasting adjustments, but the tone shifted as the weeks progressed. The words sharpened, carrying an impatience I recognized all too well. I clicked another message. This time, the thread was unmistakable. Blake reminding Ken to rewrite the retention model. Ken saying he did not feel comfortable. Blake insisting. Then a final line from Blake near midnight. We need those numbers adjusted before the next board sync. Do it. My stomach tightened. For a moment, I just stared at the text, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator in the background. I felt something inside me go quiet. Not numb, just incredibly still. I opened a second folder and found access logs. Rows of timestamps, IP addresses, user identifiers. I knew the pattern so well I could read it the way others read a book. My name appeared repeatedly, but the times were impossible. 2 in the morning, 3:30, almost every night for 2 consecutive weeks. Someone had used credentials tied to my account to access restricted data sets. Someone wanted my digital fingerprints on work I never touched. I whispered into the silence. They wanted this to look like I did it. The files blurred for a moment, not because of the screen, but because my eyes were stinging. I blinked hard and forced myself to keep going. I clicked into an Excel sheet named Cost Adjustment 2022. At first glance, it looked like a normal budget breakdown, but then I saw the entries. Obscure marketing fees paid to shell vendors, inflated R&D expenses with no corresponding project logs, recurring payments labeled consulting that matched none of our approved contractors. I scrolled further and froze. One tab marked confidential_projections listed estimated payout distributions after the Series B round. Several estimates were marked for direct transfer to accounts that did not belong to the company. The realization hit me like cold water. They had been siphoning money long before the metrics problem. I closed the sheet and pressed the heels of my palms against my eyes. My heart thudded heavily. I thought I had already braced myself for betrayal the moment they rewrote my reports, but this was bigger. This was criminal, and I was standing at the center of a storm I had never asked to enter. When I opened the next file, I saw a list of domains and authentication keys. It took me a moment to understand what I was looking at. These were export logs. Raw user metadata had been transferred to an advertising network based in Nevada, completely unauthorized, completely illegal. Every transfer was logged under a sanitized internal tag, as if they had already prepared a script to deny responsibility. I whispered, barely audible, "This isn't just about me. They sold user data. They sold people's trust." For a long moment, I sat motionless, feeling the apartment closing in around me. The truth was no longer a quiet bruise on my ego. It was a wound that spread outward, touching millions of unsuspecting users, the same users whose privacy I had promised to protect through every line of code I wrote. My chest ached with a mixture of disappointment and something sharper, something like resolve. The next morning, I walked to a small cafe in the Mission District. Eli had texted me late the previous night. He wanted to talk in person. I arrived first and chose a corner table. The scent of cinnamon and espresso drifted through the room while people typed on laptops around me, unaware I was sitting with a folder full of evidence that could destroy a company. Eli arrived looking paler than usual, as if he had not slept. He sat down and pulled a flash drive from his pocket with trembling fingers. "Asha," he said quietly, "I saved this weeks ago. I didn't know what to do with it, but after what they did to you, I couldn't keep it anymore." "What is it?" I asked softly. "The full system access logs. Everything, even the ones Ken tried to delete." I took the flash drive slowly. "Why did you keep this?" He swallowed hard. "Because Blake threatened me." When I asked him why the data didn't match the old models, he pulled me into his office and told me I needed to focus on my future with the company instead of questioning leadership decisions. I was scared, but I also felt something was wrong. I studied him for a long moment. His hands were shaking. "Eli," I said gently, "you did the right thing by coming here. I should have said something sooner. I'm sorry." I reached out and touched his hand briefly. "It's not your fault. They put you in an impossible position." He nodded, staring at the table. After a moment, he stood and left quickly, as if lingering too long might put him in danger. I watched him disappear into the crowd outside and felt a pang of sadness. Fear had hollowed him out. And he wasn't the only one. Later that afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered cautiously. Asha, it's Marcy from PR. I blinked in surprise. We rarely interacted beyond superficial greetings. Marcy, is everything all right? She hesitated. No, not really. Listen, I don't have long. We're being told to prepare a crisis statement. Something generic. Something we can release if anything leaks. My jaw tightened. What exactly do they expect to leak? Asha, her voice lowered. You know what? Everyone in leadership is acting terrified. They're shredding documents, they're locking drawers, they're asking us to draft messages that avoid admitting wrongdoing while sounding like we're cooperating. I closed my eyes, feeling dread settle deeper. Why are you telling me this? Because, Asha, she whispered, I don't think you're the villain here. They're treating you like a threat because they know what they did. I'm scared, but if you need someone to confirm anything later, I'll try to help. Thank you, I said quietly. She hung up quickly as if she afraid someone might overhear. That evening, I sat with my laptop again, scrolling through more files. The weight of what I had discovered pressed against my chest. I felt a wave of helplessness followed by an unexpected clarity. I needed advice from someone I trusted, someone who understood the consequences. I called an old friend in Oakland, a privacy advocate who now worked for a nonprofit defending user data rights. When she picked up, I told her everything. Not dramatically, just the facts. She listened without interrupting. When she finished, she exhaled sharply. Asha, what you're describing is federal-level violation. If this is accurate, Helix Lab could be investigated by the FTC or worse. You need to secure those files, and you need legal guidance. Hearing it spoken out loud sent a shiver through me. Asha, she continued, this isn't just corporate misconduct. This impacts people's identities, locations, behaviors. Whatever you do next, be careful. After we ended the call, I sat in silence, feeling a mixture of dread and validation. I had been fighting alone for so long. Hearing someone confirm the magnitude of the wrongdoing made my pulse race, but it also lit a small flame inside me. Someone believed me. Someone understood the stakes. The next morning, as I sat with a cup of lukewarm tea, my phone rang again. This time, it was a number I recognized, Jordan Hale from Orion Data. I answered cautiously. Asha, he said, I heard what happened, and I've also seen your work over the years, and I think you deserve better than the environment you came from. We're building a transparency-based analytics platform, something that actually respects users. And we need someone who understands how to protect data rather than twist it. I felt my throat tighten. Jordan, I don't know what to say. Say you'll meet with us, he replied warmly. Even if you're not ready to commit to anything, I just want you to know you have options. Real ones. For the first time in weeks, I felt the lightness in my chest. Not joy, not relief, something quieter. The possibility of hope. I'll meet with you, I said softly. Good. I'll send details. After the call ended, I sat for a long time, staring at the city skyline through my window. For a brief moment, I felt seen, respected, wanted. But as I reached for my laptop, that fragile hope faltered. Several folders in my backup directory were suddenly grayed out. I clicked the first one. Access denied. I tried another. Same result. My hands trembled. Someone from Helix Lab had located the secondary server and revoked my permissions. They knew I had been in the files. Someone was trying to cut me off before I could uncover the rest. I sat there, in the dim light of my apartment, the weight of the danger settling in like fog rolling in from the bay. But under that fear was something steadier, a resolve that had been building quietly since this began. I opened a new window and started searching for ways to extract the information before they erased it completely, knowing that whatever happened next would determine the trajectory of everything that followed. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you. Chapter 4. The Collapse They Built for Themselves. I started the next week in a different city, in a different building, with a different weight in my chest. Oakland felt softer than San Francisco, less frantic, less wired with the tension I had grown used to. The morning I walked into Orion Data for the first time, the sunlight streamed through the tall windows and the air actually smelled clean. People smiled in a way that did not look forced. No one flinched when I walked past. No one lowered their voice. For the first time in months, I felt like I was breathing without bracing for impact. Jordan met me in the lobby with a warm grin. "Asha, you made it. How are you feeling?" I let out a quiet breath. "Still figuring that out," I said, "but being here helps." He nodded. "Take it slow. You're safe here, and we're excited to have you." He led me to a bright, open workspace where 5 engineers sat around a whiteboard filled with scribbled diagrams. They looked up as I approached, curious but welcoming. Jordan clapped his hands lightly. "Everyone, this is Asha Verma. She's leading the Integrity Module project. Trust me, you're going to want to hear what she has in mind." They introduced themselves one by one. Ravi, a back-end engineer with a calm demeanor. Kim, a sharp data architect. Nora, a systems specialist with quick wit. Dante, who handled security and audits. And Leah, a junior engineer with bright eyes and a notebook already open. It felt unreal to see people excited rather than threatened by my presence. I spent the first hour explaining the goal of the module, a system that recorded every data change with a locked timestamp, a truth-preserving layer that even leadership could not alter. It was ambitious, but elegant. As I spoke, I watched the team's expressions shift from curiosity to determination. Robbie tapped his pen thoughtfully. "So, basically a trail that can't be manipulated." "Exactly," I said. "If someone tries to edit a metric, the system logs the attempt and rejects the override. Once a number exists, it stays as it is." Leah grinned. "Sounds like the opposite of whatever Helix Lab was doing." The room fell quiet for a moment. I gave a small nod. They understood. We spent the next few days sketching architecture diagrams, establishing constraints, dividing tasks. The work felt honest, clean, the kind of engineering that made me remember why I loved data in the first place. On Saturday morning, I drove my mother to a follow-up appointment at a small clinic in Oakland. She walked slowly but steadily beside me, her scarf fluttering in the light breeze. "Mom," I said softly, "I'm sorry I haven't told you everything. The past few weeks were a lot." She reached for my hand. "You don't ever need to apologize for carrying burdens, Asha. But you do need to remember who you are when the world tries to change you." I swallowed. "I thought I was losing myself." She squeezed my fingers. "If you kept the truth, you lost nothing important." Her words settled deep inside me. For a moment, the ache in my chest eased. By Monday, Helix Lab was unraveling faster than anyone predicted. I heard the first pieces through industry chatter. Pinnacle Capital had requested raw datasets ahead of a final diligence session. They wanted unaltered logs, complete model outputs, and a copy of the historical pipelines. It was the kind of request you could only dodge for so long. Later that afternoon, Jordan walked to my desk holding his phone, eyebrows raised. "You'll want to see this." He handed me the screen. A message from someone in our partner network. "Helix Lab's numbers don't match their pitch deck. Something smells off." I felt a coldness spread through me. They were being cornered. That evening, I checked the news.
Nothing yet. No leaks, no articles. But the silence had a certain vibration, the kind of quiet that comes before something breaks. The next day, the break arrived. A notification popped up on my phone, a link from a mid-tier tech news site. The headline made my stomach clench. Helix Lab manipulated user data before funding round. I clicked it with shaking fingers. The article detailed internal emails, snippets of conversations between Blake and Ken, screenshots of inflated dashboards, logs of unauthorized access attempts tied to senior leadership accounts. My breath caught in my throat. This was not my doing. I had not spoken to any journalists. I had not shared anything beyond my circle of trust. Someone else had pulled the trigger. Then my phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "It's Marcy. I couldn't stay silent. Be careful." I sat back on my couch stunned. She had done it. Brave, terrified Marcy from PR had leaked the files. She must have known the risk. She must have known she would lose her job. But she had chosen truth despite everything. The article spread quickly. By nightfall, it had reached Twitter. People were outraged, sharing screenshots and demanding accountability. I saw lawyers commenting, data privacy experts weighing in, and former employees of other startups telling their own stories. The hashtag data integrity shot upward until it trended across the tech community. I felt both uneasy and strangely calm. None of this felt like revenge. It felt like gravity doing its work. Within 24 hours, the first investor pulled out of the Series B deal. By the 30th hour, 2 more had quietly withdrawn interest. At the 32nd hour, a law firm representing a small equity group sent a formal request demanding Helix Lab provide complete documentation from 2019 through 2022. Inside sources began messaging on anonymous boards about chaos inside the company, team leads fighting, senior engineers threatening to quit, compliance officers scrambling through old drives. Every rumor felt like echoes of a machine finally choking on its own fabrications. I heard through another contact that Ken had broken down in a meeting. "Blake did everything," he allegedly said. "I only followed his instructions." I could almost picture him, hands shaking, face pale, the guilt of months finally catching up to him. Part of me felt sorry for him. A larger part of me remembered he could have chosen differently. That evening, I sat at my desk in my Oakland apartment and opened the latest industry report. I scrolled until I saw the section on valuations. Helix Lab had dropped 80% in 48 hours. The chart looked like a cliff edge. My phone buzzed again. A message from Jordan. "You seeing this?" I typed back. "I am." A few seconds later, he replied, "You okay?" I hesitated before responding. "I'm not happy. I'm not angry either. I just feel quiet." He sent one more message. "Makes sense. Let me know if you need anything." I set the phone aside and stared at the wall for a long moment. Quiet. That was the only word that fit. The kind of quiet that comes not from relief or triumph, but from recognition. The silence I had felt months before when I saw the numbers turn red. The silence I had felt in that conference room when Blake's smile hardened. The silence that followed every lie logged in the system. Now it was the silence of consequences catching up. I closed my laptop and stood by the window. Oakland's nightlights shimmered faintly across the water. Cars hummed on the freeway. Somewhere far away, a train horn sounded. I watched the world outside and let my thoughts settle. This was not joy. It was not victory. It was simply the truth arriving on its own schedule, as it always does. And when I finally stepped away from the window, I felt the first real sense of peace I had known for a long time. If this story touched you, please subscribe and let someone out there feel less alone. Thank you.
Chapter 5. The Justice That Didn't Need My Hand. I arrived at the office in Oakland earlier than usual the next morning, wanting a few quiet minutes before the day fully started. The building felt calm at that hour, with soft light drifting across the open space and only the low hum of servers filling the silence. I set my bag down, powered on my monitor, and waited for the desktop to load. As the screen flickered awake, the television mounted on the far wall caught my attention. The headline running across the bottom froze me in place. Helix Lab files for bankruptcy. I stared at the words without moving. No shock, no rush of satisfaction, just a stillness settling deep inside me, as if my mind had already accepted this outcome long before the world caught up. I stood there watching the reporter summarize the collapse. Leadership turmoil, investor withdrawals, mounting allegations, regulatory inquiries, years of trust lost in days. A voice drifted through my thoughts. My own voice, quiet and certain. The truth always finds its way. I just happened to be standing where it passed through. Footsteps approached from behind. Jordan walked in carrying a cup of coffee and followed my gaze to the television. "Asha," he said softly. "I figured you might see that today." I nodded. "It doesn't feel how I thought it might." "How does it feel?" he asked. I thought for a moment. Like something heavy finally set itself down. He gave a small, understanding smile. "If you need time, take it. No explanations needed." But I did not feel like running from anything anymore. I had done enough running for a lifetime. Around noon, I stepped outside for air and saw Eli waiting near the corner of the building, hands shoved in his pockets, shoulders tense. When he spotted me, he straightened but did not move closer until I nodded that it was all right. He approached slowly. "Hi, Asha." "Hi, Eli," I said gently. "You doing okay?" He let out a shaky breath. "Not really, but I wanted to see you. I owe you something." We found a small bench near a set of planters. He sat down beside me, staring at his shoes. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have stood up for you. I should have refused Blake. I knew what he asked was wrong and I still signed off. I regret it every day." His voice cracked a little and I could hear the weight of what he carried. I folded my hands together and spoke softly. "Fear makes people do things they're not proud of. You came forward when you could. That matters." He wiped a hand across his face. "I was hoping, I know it sounds crazy, but I was hoping you might consider putting in a word for me at Orion. I understand if you don't want to, but I want to start over somewhere I don't have to be afraid." I studied him. The last time I saw Eli at Helix Lab, he looked hollowed out. Now he looked human again, fragile but honest. "I can recommend you," I said, "if you're ready to fight for your principles this time." His eyes lifted with something like hope. I really am." "Then send me your resume, we'll take it from there." He stood up quickly, hands still trembling as if afraid I might change my mind. "Asha, thank you," he whispered before walking away. When I returned upstairs, Jordan was waiting near my desk with a grin that looked almost too big to be real. "Asha," he said, "we did it." I raised an eyebrow. "Did what?" "The transparency module," he said, leaning against the desk. "The financial firm in New York signed the $7 million contract. Your system sealed the deal." I blinked at him. "$7 million?" He laughed. "Your work convinced them we were serious about rebuilding ethics in analytics. They said you changed the conversation." I did not know what to say. I felt a warmth spread across my chest, something like pride, but quieter. A different kind of victory, one built on truth rather than retaliation. At the end of the week, I drove my mother to her follow-up appointment. She sat in the passenger seat watching the trees blur past the window. When we came out of the clinic, she tugged gently on my arm. "You look lighter," she said. "Do I?" I smiled. She nodded. "Whatever storm you walked through it with your integrity. That matters more than any job." Her words settled over me with the familiar comfort of home. The following Monday, Orion released the public demo of the Integrity module. For hours, my inbox flooded with notifications. Investors asking questions, journalists requesting interviews, engineers from other companies wanting to know about the architecture. The first tech blog to cover it used a phrase that made me stop mid-sentence. Asha Verma, the Integrity Engineer. I sat still for several seconds, letting the title wash over me, not as flattery but as closure. After everything that had been taken from me, after everything that nearly destroyed the career I built with my own hands, I had become known not for the scandal, but for standing on the right side of it. Later that evening, I checked the news again. The latest headline came from a national outlet. Former Helix Lab CEO under federal investigation for financial misconduct. I read the article slowly. Illegal payouts, misappropriation of funds, unauthorized data transfers. The investigation was early but serious. My name appeared only once, mentioned as a former employee who declined to comment. I had never spoken to authorities. I had not filed a complaint. I had not chased retribution. Yet the consequences still unfolded. I closed the browser and walked to the window. Oakland's skyline glowed softly under the early evening sky. I rested my forehead lightly against the glass and let out a breath I did not realize I had been holding. Quiet. That was what I felt. A quiet that did not need justification, did not need applause. A quiet that came from knowing I had not crossed the lines they begged me to cross. I thought about Helix Lab, about the faces I used to see every morning, about the silence in that conference room when Blake announced my suspension. I thought about Eli's trembling voice asking for a chance to rebuild. I thought about the truth sleeping inside those logs for months until someone finally pulled it into the light. And I realized the justice I had been waiting for had nothing to do with punishment. It had everything to do with clarity. I whispered to myself, barely audible. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is simply letting people face what they created. The office lights dimmed automatically as the sun dipped below the horizon. I stood there a little longer, grateful for the stillness and the new beginning it carried. And if you have ever found yourself standing at a crossroads where your principles felt heavier than your paycheck, remember this. The truth will always outlast the people who try to bury it. Quiet revenge does not shout or strike. It stands firm. It chooses integrity even when no one is watching. If you have ever walked that line, share your story, stay with us, and keep listening. There is strength in choosing what is right, and there is a place here for voices like yours.